Welcome to the Communicationdiva podcast, episode 6. Today's podcast is a feature interview with family therapist Anita Bloy. Anita now works primarily with couples and will be talking with Jenn about couples communication. You know, I've thought for some time now that good communication is essential for two people striving to build a strong, mutually supportive relationship. The ability to express oneself well and, more importantly, to listen carefully to another person. Oh, hang on, the game's back on.
Hey everyone, this is Jenn Swanson and welcome back to Communicationdiva, the podcast that hopes to help you learn to communicate a little bit better and therefore to improve your relationships. And I am here with my featured guest today, Anita Bloy, who is a couple and family therapist who works in the Lower Mainland, which if you don't know where that is, it is a part of British Columbia and very close to Vancouver, which is our big city down here. So I am happy to be here, and I'm looking out the window of Anita's beautiful apartment, which has a stunning and spectacular view, and it is a sunny January Vancouver day. So I am thrilled to be here. Welcome, Anita.
Thank you. Welcome. Thanks for having me.
Fabulous. I'm just going to start by asking you how you got into your career of being a therapist.
So I'm a registered clinical counselor, and I've been working as a therapist for over 20 years. I just thought I'd like to keep working with people. I love working with people because we are social beings. We don't live on desert islands. We need to be in relationship, and we need to learn. We need to know how to communicate and be our best.
And that's part of the reason that I started this whole podcast in the first place, is because I was finding that that it's not really something we spend a lot of time thinking about in general life, is how we communicate with one another.
No, we definitely don't. And quite often we learn haphazardly. We get modeled certain ways of speaking and interacting by our parents and, the communities we grew up in. And sometimes that's not always the best.
Right. Right. I think lots of us have found that out over the years. And when you do couple therapy, what does that look like? Is it initiated by one person or both people, or how does that come about, or is there a pattern?
Usually one person in the relationship is wanting something different before the other. And in most cases, it's, one person gives me a call and says that they have challenges. And one of the most common descriptors that people come in with is that they say we have communication challenges, or we have problem communicating. That's one of the most, as I said, one of the most common things people request help with.
So where do you begin with somebody on something like that?
So when a couple first comes in, it's important to engage both people. It's important to hear both people's point of view and what they see as missing or problematic in their relationship. And my work is not just about listening to the stories, but listening to or observing how they interact. Who, for instance, speaks more, whether they interrupt each other, whether they contradict each other, those sorts of behavioral patterns as well. So it's not just the words that they say.
Right. So you have them both come in at some time together and have some conversation. And how long do the series of sessions usually go, or is it different depending on the couple?
Well, it's definitely different depending on the couple. Most people, I shouldn't say there is no most, but most people can see significant changes in their patterns of communication or the closeness in their relationship within a couple of sessions. That you don't have to come to therapy to create differences in your relationship over, you don't have to come for months and months. Some people do, definitely, they come for tune-ups. But ideally, you talk about something, you give them a few suggestions, some things that they can do differently at home, and then they go home and they practice, they play with it. And sometimes it's just doing one or two things differently.
So what, out of all the things that are problem areas, what are some of the most common areas between couples and their breakdown of communication?
So there are some content issues that most couples argue about, and those are usually sex, money, or extended family kind of challenges. So if we talk about content, it is helping them to kind of sort out differences of opinion or to express themselves more honestly and openly in those areas. But in other problems are around the patterns of interaction. So one person, for instance, is really angry and they can't express their emotions in an appropriate way, and that shuts the other person down. One person might want more closeness in their relationship, and the other one, or they want to be more dependent, and the other person might want some more distance, and they might want to do their own thing. And so it's not necessarily a content, but it's how they interact. I call them tensions in a relationship that couples fluctuate throughout the stages of their life together, whether it's 10 years together, 20 years together, 30 years together. And the tension between being close and connected versus being independent and doing their own thing is one of the biggest challenges. And it works really well if both people are on the same page, right? If both people want closeness and connection and they spend time together, and at the same time, then they both want a little bit more independence. The challenges happen is that when one person wants more closeness and connection and the other person wants to do their own thing, and then you've got that tension. And how do you maneuver through that?
Right. Well, there's the question. Do you give them specific things for homework?
Usually my homework is around paying attention to things and noticing their own kind of reactions, their own thought patterns, their own feelings. That when you're talking about communication in any kind of close, intimate relationship, it really is about knowing yourself and being able to communicate where you're at in a way that the other person understands it and that the other person is receptive towards it. The healthiest communications really are about just sharing who you are and letting that other person kind of into your world, into your experience. And in a long-term relationship, whether it's a marriage or a common law kind of relationship, I think we all get in those relationships because we want to know another person, but we also want to have that other person know and understand and to get us. And communication is about really being honest about where we're at and sharing that with the other person.
So even if you've been in a relationship with someone for 20 years or 30 years, are there more things to know?
Oh, I would think so. That I know for sure that I am a very different person than I was when I first got married, right? And we all go through our own personal developmental stages, and so does a relationship. And so it would get boring if we were the same as we were, 10, 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah. Right. So maybe getting to know the person all over again is part of some of the work that you do?
Absolutely. Yes, yes, definitely. Yeah.
So as far as taking it apart, when people first come in, how do you know where to start?
Well, I just usually ask them a really open-ended question in terms of, what brought them here and what is something that they would like different. Because counseling is about creating changes in people's lives. And particularly with couples, a lot of it, as I said, is about how they communicate. And so they need to know what they want different at the end of it. And the challenge then, because many couples come in and they want the other person to be different. And so part of the work with couples is to get each person to identify what they personally want different with themselves, not necessarily with the other person. Though, to be honest, it usually starts with each person saying what they want different from the other person. And then you just have to change their perspective and help them to look more at themselves.
Right, because it's important to learn all our lives about ourselves more deeply. Yeah. Do you notice changes or differences in communication style with different generations?
The language can be different. Sometimes the younger generation, they use, even with the texting, right? And the written language they say things that it's very much about the culture that they've grown up in. Yeah, I haven't really thought about that one.
Not different patterns of communicating.
Not necessarily. No. I think basically everybody has the same human needs, and to be loved and to be accepted and to be understood. And we might communicate that slightly differently, but the underlying needs are there, and we are more or less the same biologically, physiologically, as we were generations ago. Yeah.
Right. And the need to be listened to and to be understood seems to be something that I know in the classes that I do is not a common thing. I mean, the need is a common need, but the activity of having somebody sit and listen uninterrupted actively is sometimes an unusual one for people.
Absolutely, because in most conversations, when you're having two people talking to each other, most people are thinking about what they are going to say next, that they very rarely give 100% undivided attention to that other person. And so quite often, you asked about exercises, is that it's called reflective listening. I mean, you just get the couple to totally clear their mind about what they wanted to say and to reflect back what the other person has said, not just the words, but what they guess is their underlying feeling or their intention or their hope. And the sole purpose is to be understood, is so that you want to express to your partner that you understand, you know where they're coming from. And that's a gift that I think couples can give each other. Yeah.
I'm sure that there is a whole world out there of information on couples communication. If someone is just starting out as a couple, what kind of advice would you give to that couple?
Well, I think that you can always find information on skills, like communication skills, right? In terms of body language, of using eye language, of maintaining eye contact, making sure that you're nice and relaxed, like all of those concrete skills. And there's lots of books. But I think it's more important to enter any kind of conversation to kind of check your own attitude. Where are you coming into this conversation as a way of winning, as getting your point across? Are you coming from a place of anger and resentment? Or are you coming from a position of being more open and loving and caring? And ideally, in any long-term relationship, all conversations are about increasing that closeness and that connection and resolving whatever difference you may have. Because, I mean, every couple is going to have differences. They are two different people. And so they bring that difference. But if you come into in a conversation wanting to change that other person, you're not going to win. It's not going to benefit. So you have to come into all conversations with the intention of coming to some kind of compromise, of working together, of being cooperative. And those are the most successful kind of conversations. And that I think is the underlying skill. No, it's not even a skill. It's a frame of mind. It's coming in with your heart versus coming in wanting to win.
Right. So attitude is, and motivation, I would imagine, would be an important thing to think about. So for new couples, it's that kind of thing. It's thinking about where you're coming from and your attitude and listening. What about conflict? People have different styles of conflict.
Yeah, no, they definitely do. Some people are more comfortable with it than others, based upon their background and their experiences. And as you are learning about the other person, you're going to learn, how they resolve conflict. But it's also knowing a lot about yourself and whether you are comfortable with it or not. And it is taking responsibility for yourself and knowing that if you are a person who reacts and, in fact, overreacts and makes mountains out of molehills, then every person needs to take responsibility for that and to calm themselves down, not expecting their partner to do that. And if you are the kind of person who is uncomfortable with conflict and runs away from it, then you need to, again, take responsibility for that and to do your own personal work.
Mm-hmm. So are there, I'm sure there are, but when you come across people who don't want to work together and you've got one person coming to you and the other person doesn't, I'm fine, you go get fixed kind of thing, what do you tell that person?
Well, I give that one person an option, to look at themselves, of course. And quite often when they do that, though, they realize that if their partner is not willing to engage in couple counseling, then they have a choice. They can continue to work on themselves and work on their half of the relationship. But usually what happens is they realize that, well, their partner's not in it with them, and they make a choice perhaps to leave the relationship. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, though, they can work on themselves and things can change. Mm-hmm. Because really, a marriage it's a system. So, you just change one part of any kind of a system and it impacts other parts. Sometimes in a positive way, right? Yeah.
Right. And people do grow as they mature and as they have new experiences and find new interests and make new friends. And so I'm sure all of those things have an impact upon the relationship too.
Yeah, definitely. Because each person, you're right, develops in their own unique way and they go through their own developmental stages. Absolutely. Yeah. Mm. Their interests change too. Mm.
What are some of the most interesting things that you have learned in your journey as a counselor?
My journey as a counselor, I am always amazed at how, when I'm talking to clients, that in some ways they reflect what I'm going through in my own life. That, as I said, we don't live on desert islands, and that people generally, we all kind of struggle in some ways with this very, very, very similar things, and that we can help each other and support each other, and we witness each other's journeys, and we get information from that. And for me, I know that I am helpful and supportive of clients, but I am also honored in some ways that I share their lives and I learn a lot from my clients. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's almost a very privileged place to be in if you're hearing all of these stories and the trials and tribulations and the pain that goes along with some of it, and probably some of the joy too.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Well, that's great. Good. Was there anything else that you had thought about that you wanted to say today about therapy or about couples or about relationships?
I don't really think so. I think that the journey of being a couple together is a wonderful gift, that we learn a lot about ourselves in our relationships with other people. And it is the best place to grow as individuals. It is I think one of the only places where our buttons can really get pushed and we are forced to learn about ourselves. I think, as I said, it's also a privilege to be able to really witness another person's life, to be there and through all the ups and downs. And at the end of the day, it's quite a privilege to be in any long-term coupled relationship. Yeah.
Good. There was a question about, I had asked you earlier before we started about a book recommendation that if people are interested in learning more about communicating in couples and being in relationship with one another. And I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. There are many books out there on the market about general couple communication or communicating in general. But there's one book that I do recommend to clients, and it's called Conscious Loving, The Journey to Co-Commitment. And it's by a couple by the name of Gay and Kathleen Hendricks. And they not only just talk about couple skills, but about the attitude and the conscious kind of decision that every couple needs to make as they engage in every kind of interaction, communication, physical interactions. That it is a conscious decision and how you do that. And it's a wonderful book.
Great. And I will put that link to that on the website on the show notes at www.communicationdiva.com, so that if you're interested in that book, there will be a link there for the recommendation that Anita made. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for taking the time today. And if people wanted to know more about you or find you, where would they go?
So my office is in Port Moody in British Columbia, but all of that contact information you can get from my web, which is www.counselingworks.ca. And counseling is spelled with 2 L's, not 1. And check out all the contact information there.
Great. Thank you so much for the time that you've taken today.
Great. Thank you for having me. Take care.
So that was my interview with Anita Bloy, clinical counselor and family therapist. And again, if you want to find out more about Anita, come over to the show notes at communicationdiva.com, episode 6, and take a look at her link to her website there and also to the book that she recommended. Now, next week, I will be bringing to you a very interesting person named Amelia McComber, who is a First Nations spiritual practitioner. And she will be explaining a little bit about what she talks about as intuition and how in the First Nations world, intuition plays a very large part in the communication system that people have with one another. And so it's a fascinating interview, and I will be bringing that to you next time in episode 7. So once again, thank you very much. Take good care, and we'll talk to you very soon.